4 Halo wizards gather around and discuss Halo in a secretive location that only they know of. Will the DoorDash driver know how to find them? Find out on this special episode of Halo Bytes.
That's what you're going with? That's what
we're wizards?
Wizards?
We're wizards now?
Yes.
I miss my pizza. Why did we have to hide the location from my DoorDash driver?
Fellow wizards, I feel that there is an imposter among us. I sense a Halo warlock in the room.
I saw Jane Vent. So this is a very interesting time in Halo's life, and we have some thoughts on what's going on. This series will be us having conversations about some hot button topics in the community and Halo in general. This episode is dedicated to Halo Infinite's supposed 10-year plan. I'm going to be dead honest here. This scares me. Not because I think 343 doesn't have the gumption, but because of what it means for the base game. I am worried 343 will be focusing too much on the future, and that's weird to say, right? That they're being too prepared? The launch of a game is absolutely critical for the rest of its life.
Unless you're Destiny.
Ooh.
First impressions are everything. So if 343 is putting too much work into future expansions, what does that say about the base game? Infinite can't launch with a mediocre-length single-player campaign with promise of more in the future. That will not slide with me or the community. Obviously, I will still play these expansions, but you need a solid foundation first.
And that's not even just in lengthwise. I mean, you just need a good, I think, beginning, middle, end story first. Like, you can't expand upon, you can't just hold off other story beats for later. You have to have a solid foundation, just story, like narrative structurally.
Yeah, tell a story first, then tell other stories later.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they can't. I'm just saying that I really hope that the base game is, good. Worth your initial $60. If these 6 years of development were spent on future DLC instead of what you're getting on day one, Infinite will be fighting a battle it might not be able to win. Infinite needs a solid game at launch. So keep your heads in the present, 343.
I'm of the widely held belief that games as a service is a plague in the industry that only exists because Destiny was successful. The trick is, Destiny was lightning in a bottle. The Halo guys made a shooter game set in a Star Wars science fiction universe. Yeah, of course it'll kick ass. So when it didn't, people gave them a second chance, because they're still the fucking Halo guys. But even with that example, Destiny's 10-year plan, quote-unquote, didn't work. We're playing Destiny 2 now, and we have long since left the original Destiny behind. There are very few games I'm playing 10 years later, and none of them were planned to be that way.
Which is weird, though, in Destiny's case, because the characterization people give to Destiny as a 10-year plan, what's interesting about that, though, is that sequels were in the original development cycle. Like sequels were planned as part of that 10-year plan. It was more of a franchise plan than it was a single game plan, which honestly is a lot more sustainable. But here, we don't really know, because simultaneously they're billing it as like the single game with a longevity, but they're also saying this is setting up like, quote, future installments. So it seems like there's not really a solid plan ahead, which is not always a bad thing. But in this case, if you're like saying this, that you are following this 10-year plan structure, then, maybe Destiny's, which has been flexible over time because, they're committed to Destiny 2 now rather than making another sequel, which is part of the original plan. It seems like, despite saying that they have a 10-year plan, it's not as well thought as some of the leaked Destiny content and structuring suggested for that game.
In truth, the games industry's attention span is incredibly short, and I'm not confident that there's any way to keep the attention of gamers with a 10-year plan.
I just wanted to say how it's really sad that gamers have absolutely zero attention span these days. I get that there should be new things to keep you interested. That's not necessarily bad, but Call of Duty coming out every year in hopes to get new money and not fall out of the public eye, that's overkill.
I think that actually is the fault of the industry in creating these yearly releases from Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty are probably the large reason why we have such low attention spans. We are expecting to buy things and throw them away.
Yeah.
Especially FOMO, like seasonal content feels like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now that doesn't mean that a 10-year plan can't work, though. Drawing influences from Minecraft, as we have joked that they may do, is actually a pretty solid decision because it's the little engine that did, and that seems to be what they're doing. I have confidence 343 has the ability to pull this off, but I think I'd like them to deliver a good game before they give me a game that'll last my 20s. I'm going to be a different person when I'm 34, and the only person I care about having a good time is me right now.
If there was a game that could nail a 10-year plan, it'd be a Halo title. I don't mean that because of its gameplay necessarily, but what you can change about it. A 10-year plan isn't impossible, it's just never happened on purpose. Minecraft, like we've said, is a 10-plus-year-old game with semi-frequent updates and no full sequels. And a key point as to why games like Destiny, Anthem, Marvel's Game, and so many others failed their supposed 10-year plans is because they've lacked something longer-lasting games have had. Real customization. Now, mind you, that doesn't mean armor and weapon skins. That means map creation, game mode customization, minigame development features. Now, Halo? Forge, custom games, Firefight. Halo has the seeds that would let a game last 10 years. A way for the community to fill the gaps.
Which is interesting that despite them kind of like doing lip service to, you know, they'll have Forge spotlights, even some playlist rotations with community-made maps, there's never really been a robust custom games like on-a-line feature, which I believe they're adding to MCC. And instead, the big thing they always push, whenever there is like a quote-unquote content drought, when I check on Halo Waypoint in between, like in the middle of a game's 4-year, 5-year life cycle, it's not about like, oh, here's what community like game types are being played this week. That's not what's on the like main site. It's all HCS. It's all the esports, which I feel like they went really hard into focusing on as if that's like the longevity thing. That does not keep my interest.
Now that I think about it, I am a little worried about that because like those longevity features you're talking about are free. The multiplayer's free. What's the $60 buying me from that?
If it's the best Forge ever, hey, maybe it'll be worth $60. My point is, none of these other games that want to last 10 years are willing to let the community help them make that happen. A game's longevity isn't something that's determined by the developers, it's determined by the tools they give to the community to make that happen.
If Halo Infinite has a broken theater mode on launch, that's going to hurt.
Ooh,
Maybe not as much as a broken Forge or custom games, because those could possibly be fixed in future patches. But if I have to go through 10 years of a crappy theater mode, which I don't think theater has ever gotten some kind of a patch, I'm going to cry.
So, since we've covered a lot of the practical content and monetization aspects, or at least just content delivery aspects, I want to focus mostly on my thoughts on 10-year plans in relation to game narratives, as I was kind of talking about earlier. I've always been a proponent of post-launch story content, and it's something that Halo has never really explored. The closest we've got are Halo 3 ODST, a standalone experience built on the very good Halo 3 sandbox and engine, and Spartan Ops, which was Spartan Ops.
We also had Halo Wars 2 Awakening the Nightmare and another small DLC for that game, which does mark the first time we've gotten actual new story content in DLC. So it puts some precedent for Infinite continuing that.
Which got me excited. It just is kind of a shame that it wasn't part of a quote-unquote mainline Halo title as part of the core FPS. Not that Halo Wars 2 is a bad game or that is not like not a part of the Halo structuring at this point, but yeah, it hopefully sets a good precedent for their you know, quote unquote mainline titles. And as much as I legitimately dug the core concept of Halo 4's post-launch story, the result, well, was that the story was treated the same way as ancillary media and wrapped up in comics despite being part of the core text, the games. And at the risk of going on a tangent about the relationship of supplementary material to mainline text and franchises, I'll just say this. A story told in the games needs to make sense and be relatively self-contained to said game. Something Destiny has polished up over the past half-decade, in which Halo has notably been a bit non-committal with right now. If you only answer questions with more questions, or relegate your answers to comic book tie-ins, of course your game's story, as it stands, will suffer.
Notice that 343 has been doing a lot of stories that barely take place after Halo 5. These have all been like past supplemental stories. Aside from that Buck book and Shadows of Reach, which just came out, I think 343 is a little scared of telling their story.
Which is also just weird because, I don't know, so much of Halo 5 has its crux on ancillary media. All of the characterization, for the most part, took place in books and comics, which I was, at the time, excited about, but now see how that actually hurt the story as it stands on its own. Like, if you're someone who just plays the core text, you shouldn't be expected to read all these other books and whatnot to have that make sense on its own. But again, I digress. The other thing is that the story shift, the spiritual reboot, bodes well for that in some ways, less sequel teases and book tie-in teases, more building a story that stands on its own. But the plan that they're touting also worries me, that instead of a structured narrative, this entire Halo game will substitute a MCU-style approach of constant narrative threads with no end in sight. And hard ends to stories are an important part of story structure. It's beginning, middle, end, not beginning, middle, 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 no end in sight. That's not how a 10-year plan should work.
You're absolutely right. Actually, just on my pager here, just got a tweet from 343. Thankfully, all of our concerns are now immediately solved since we do have shaders in Halo Infinite. So, 0 problems going forward. It's all smooth sailing from here.
We did it, Reddit.
Yeah.
We did it, Reddit. We put shaders
Another
in
epic
Infinite.
win for the free market. Good job, Halo friends. Now we're the Destiny enemies.
Destined enemies.
Destined enemies.
Destined enemies. All right, everyone. If you like this new video format and have a topic you want to see us discuss, leave it in the comments. There's more of these to come, so I will see you around.